Get the latest. Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Last week in our conversation with special report host Bret Baier, we talked a bit about these emails that have been uncovered from the beginnings of the pandemic in the winter and spring of 2020. The back and forth between Fauci and Collins, Western experts like Robert Gary from Tulane, Christian Anderson from Scripps, about the origins of the virus, and concern from Collins and Fauci and then others falling in line that if they allow the notion that the virus originated in the Wuhan virology lab to take hold, that would be problematic for international harmony, I think was the phrase that Francis Collins used. And so they wanted to immediately move to tamp down those debates and get everybody on board with natural origins. Well, Bret, subsequent to our conversation, put together a really nice piece. It's about 11 minutes long, and it's worth a listen, but I'll give you a couple of highlights in case you missed it.
I watched
really nice,
all of it. I mean, I've been addicted to it. I watched 3 nights in a row. It was so good.
Really, really good. Just walking you through the timeline and what was said by who when. And then now you have the backdrop. You have the benefit of 2020, and you have the backdrop of how this all unfolded, and then taking it back to borrow a word, its origin. So this is February 4th of 2020. Fauci, Collins, Western experts, including those two experts in the field I mentioned, Gary from Tulane and Anderson from Scripps, they start to churn, well, I would argue, maybe this is too strong a word, propaganda. They start to, Gary and Anderson reverse their positions on the possibility of a leak from the lab to publication of arguments that suggest, no, more likely than not, natural origins.
Just 4 days later, 5 American, British, and Australian researchers who were all on that Fauci conference call authored preliminary findings that abandoned their earlier private beliefs that COVID was likely the result of a laboratory leak. It's unclear what new evidence prompted such a drastic 180, but private communications show the various drafts of their report are sent to Fauci and Collins for editing and approval. The records do not reveal if they in fact edited the new version. February 16th, the first public draft is published online. Weeks later, a final version of that report is posted. Again, a total reversal of what those virologists wrote in private emails earlier. March 17th in Nature Medicine. Our analysis clearly shows that COVID is not a laboratory construct or a purposefully manipulated virus. But that was not enough to tamp down what multiple sources inside and outside government believed, that the Wuhan lab was indeed the COVID ground zero.
And then one more clip of Fauci then on April 17th. Yep. And the timing of grants that were distributed by NIH to some of the principals who authored that study that you just heard Baier reference.
The mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human.
More than a month later, we now learn Drs. Christian Anderson and Robert Gary, 2 of the authors of that scientific report who were in close contact with Dr. Fauci, are awarded a nearly $9 million research grant from Fauci's agency. A month after that, Dr. Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance, the group that did the original U.S.-funded experiments with the Chinese at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, received a $7.5 million grant over 5 years from Dr. Fauci. President Biden, a year later, tasks the U.S. intelligence community to probe the COVID origins.
And, well, let's now get to the gentleman who put together that story. Bret Baier, he is the host of Fox News Special Report, weekdays, 5 p.m. Chicago time, of course. Number one best-selling author of To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm not just trying to feed your ego by playing your stuff back to you. Just sort of set the table. So after all that investigation you did and putting together that timeline, so what are the takeaways you have in terms of the questions that are pending, in addition to the obvious one, the origin, the questions that are pending about the handling of this from beginning to present?
Well, I think there's a list of questions. By the way, we've engaged NIH and Dr. Fauci, and they just haven't answered any of those questions. And one of them is, what changed in the 48 hours from when Gary and Anderson and others are on a conference call raising questions about they can't see how this virus could do it evolutionary, could jump just by how it is acting and how it's constructed, to 100%. It went from a bat to a pangolin to a human. And what happened in those 48 hours? There's nothing that was not out there prior to that. So the communications indicate that there was a lot of kind of herding the cats. And why? Why is that? You know, it's evidence that we funded some of that research through EcoHealth Alliance. I think it's fair to say there was a big worry that we'd be swept into all of this. Not that definitively U.S. research created COVID-19, but that there was the possibility that the U.S. could be implicated.
Well, then why, Dr. Robert Gary from Tulane, that $9 million grant he got, why exactly was he awarded that money?
Well, that's a good question too. All these guys operate in grants. It's kind of like they're feeding off the largesse of the NIH, and specifically Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins. They distribute these grants. It's a normal thing, but in order to get them, they have to play by the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know this to be true, but, the timing of this and the progression of this, I mean, this suggests, you help me on this campaign, and there's a patronage job for you on the other end of it. There's a contract for you on the other end of it. This looks like, old school machine politics, possibly.
Well, it does look like that, and it's fair to just lay that out. But it's, we can't definitively say that.
Right.
Because, we don't have that answer. We're asking those questions, but we can lay out what is private and what's public. And it's fair to make a circumstantial case, at least.
And the other thing, too, I mean, per your reporting about this back and forth and whether, and these, the articles that were ultimately published being sent to Fauci, did he review, did he edit? And if he even saw them, to then go out on the cable news shows and reference that article and not disclose that you had a hand in it. That's problematic too, ethically.
That's definitively true. That definitively happened, and it started from the White House briefing podium, where he references this Nature Medicine article like it is a detached thing from his world, that he's referencing these scientists that on their own have come up with this conclusion as the reason he gets to evolutionary jump. But he does not disclose that not only did he kind of help start it, but he was sent to suggest and edit that very piece.
Yeah, Matt Taibbi has a good piece in his Substack about misinformation and all this censoriousness that's going on in big tech and so forth. And he just has a good line. He said, the only thing that's worse than the misinformation that everybody's complaining about from Joe Rogan or whoever is official misinformation. That's the most dangerous misinformation of all.
That's true. And so what we don't know is we need answers for that. Now, why do we need them? Because knowing the origins of this thing could potentially prevent another thing down the road in the future. But more importantly, what's the implication of no transparency in one of the biggest health crises we've ever seen?
I wanted to get your reaction to, sort of in the context to a tweet from Joe Lockhart, former press spokesman for Bill Clinton. He tweeted out yesterday, ahead of the midterms, I look forward to watching every Republican senator oppose the first black woman to the Supreme Court. It sort of shows your hand, in case it wasn't obvious, that we're looking to play racial politics with whichever black jurist Joe Biden nominates, and that's our primary objective.
Yeah. And that's, the big issue here. It's not that they're hiding anything by the president coming out and saying, I am picking a black woman. And there's all this question about whether that's affirmative action, essentially, as the Supreme Court takes up these big affirmative action cases. But I think the bigger question is what it's going to be attempted to be used as politically. And I don't think he's right. I think there are people like Susan Collins and others, Lindsey Graham even, who could vote for a very qualified liberal justice if there are not problems. They've done it before.
Well, the
midterms are coming up, so they have to. This is their last hope, don't you think, to bash Republicans one more time?
Yeah, but the problem is if the Republicans don't play along. I mean, listen, it's not going to shift the ideological bent of the court. So if it's someone qualified, they've done it before, where the person doesn't have a problem.
Well, right, and many times, and going in both directions in a bygone era. Antonin Scalia, I think, got 86 Senate votes for confirmation. I don't think he'd get 86 votes if he was nominated today.
No.
So it's just a different environment. But I mean, to your point, and Kim Strassel writes about this too in the Journal today. He nominates somebody by the end of February, and it's somebody like that D.C. Appellate Court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's already been confirmed just last year. Well, then enough Republicans moved to confirm her before the spring. Okay, well, now we're back to talking about inflation, whatever's going on in Ukraine, the border, and all the other things they don't want to talk about.
Exactly. I think Joe's misplaced here, and just by saying it, kind of the game is up. Now, that's not to say that Republicans are not going to try to block somebody that they don't feel is qualified, or on their own political side do what they do. But there are Republicans, I think, who would look at this and say, they have the right, elections have consequences, and if this person's qualified, they should get my vote.
Right. Who's on the short list? Is there anybody, I know I've read many publications, but any big surprises do you think that we'll see?
No, I don't think so. And the whole Kamala Harris thing is, I just think, it's just chatter. It's not real. She's going to head up the committee. It would almost be like Vice President Cheney, heading up the committee for the vice presidential selection for Bush. Picks herself.
After careful review, I found that I'm the most qualified.
Turns out.
Yeah. It's bitter irony. So Sweden yesterday announced that their public health officials have decided they are not going to recommend vaccines for kids 5 to 11 years old, saying that with the very small chance of the very small risks associated with COVID and 5 to 11-year-olds, the dangers outweigh the benefits is essentially what they said. So, you're starting to have some dominoes fall both around vaccinations, around opening up countries, Denmark, UK, Czech Republic. How long till it comes to the shores of blue state America, do you think?
I think it's going to take a while, judging by the healthcare infrastructure and what's happening. It's almost going the other way as far as it seems, getting more vaccines and more access to young people. But I think each one of these events raises eyebrows, and eventually science says well, let's look at the data. And we're not there yet.
Well, and Dr. Scott Gottlieb, was just on MSNBC moments ago, and he's calling for lifting COVID mitigation mandates as aggressively as they were put in place. Because he said that the country is exhausted by this pandemic and that mandates are not needed.
I think that's the way to go. And if you look at the midterms, I think there's going to be a lot of politicians and possibly politicians on both sides of the aisle who have that message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, once you lose the Atlantic on masks and Scott Gottlieb on mandates, you're in trouble.
It's over.
You're in trouble. That's right.
Checkmate.
Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, special report, weekdays, 5 p.m. Chicago time. #1 best-selling author of To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. Bret, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Nothing speaks louder about an auto dealer than a happy customer. And at Joe Cotton Ford, they have many.
It's like my family. I never go anywhere else than Joe Cotton Ford. If I have to buy a car, I always go first Joe Cotton Ford. And they have best service ever, and the best price, and the best models.
My overall experience is